Hi, it's Freeway Frank. Thank you so much for joining me this week on the Drive-By Podcast, brought to you by our friends at Dormez-vous. Their New Year, New You event is happening as we speak across all their Quebec stores, and you can find out how you can get better sleep by speaking to a sleep expert at Dormez-vous. All the details and more about their event coming up a little later on during this podcast. Meanwhile, we thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And we thank Dormez-vous for being our lead sponsor here on the podcast.
This is the Drive-By with Freeway Frank.
No one is at my house. Usually I come on here, first 3 episodes of the Drive-By, and say, so-and-so is at my house. And I sound that excited, by the way, and shocked. There's shock in my voice because I'm like, I can't believe, it's at my house. I can't believe this person actually made it to my house, especially when they come here from out of town and have to board a plane and find their way here. We always help them get here, by the way. But I thank you for joining me nonetheless for the Drive-By Solo Sessions. That's right. What you see is what you get. And let me tell you, it's been a freaking disaster here for the last couple of hours. I know you were probably thinking, I was going to say, it's been a freaking disaster here in Canada with COVID and the pandemic, that too. And here in Quebec, of course, with everything we've gone through. But I was referring to my podcast because the last couple of hours have been disastrous. I've been recording on and off. Press record, turn off record. I couldn't get it quite right. And that never happened in the first few episodes because when I have somebody on here, it's press record, 0 edits, we go right through it. Whether it takes half an hour, 2, or 3, as you witnessed during the Vince Guzzo interview. No holds barred. We talk about whatever we want to talk about, and that's the beauty of a podcast like the Drive-By. That's what it's about, authentic conversation, and we don't hold back. But here, tonight, it's a lot different because it's just me. So it's like Freeway Frank does his latest soliloquy on episode 4. So might tickle your fancy, might not. But let me tell you, it wasn't fun here for a couple of hours. And my wife called me up. We had dinner brought to us by a gracious neighbor who brought us some Indian food. And I had dinner. And she was like, what's wrong? And I said, I've been recording the Drive-By for the last few hours. And I did like 20 takes, and it's a mess. I can't get it right because usually when I have somebody to throw things, off of, it comes more naturally. My years in radio, I had a co-host, I had a producer that would come on. I had interviews, and even when I was solo, I could handle it because I was used to it on the medium and hosting a radio show. So she said, well, what's different from radio to this podcast? And I said, well, no. She goes, just be you. Just be yourself. And I said, well, I don't know what I'm trying to do or who I'm trying to be, but I wrote down a couple of things. She goes, well, are you doing a scripted podcast? And I said, no, how dare you say that I would do something scripted because I'm totally not into doing anything scripted. Anybody who knows me knows that my biggest failures during my broadcast career have come when I've scripted anything because I like to talk off the cuff and be me and be myself and have true conversation and wear my heart on my sleeve, as I've always said. So she's like, well, why are you trying to be someone else? And I go, I don't know. I was watching Lex Friedman, Ben Shapiro, Tucker Carlson. By the way, that's the trifecta of doom and racism to some people, not to me. I respect these guys. It doesn't matter what side of the spectrum they're on. I respect what they do and how they deliver the goods on their platforms. And she's like, well, why are you trying to be like them? And I go, I don't know, because it's polished. And when I was on the radio, it was clean and polished. And she goes, well, you're the one that told me, Frank, that when you host a podcast, when you do a podcast, there's nothing polished about a podcast. You turn on the mic. You always say, you have a drink or two. Maybe you have a bite with your guest beforehand or after or during. Maybe you smoke a cigar and you have real conversation. I'm pouring the scotch right now. By the way, never a good idea. Let me hold this up to the microphone so anyone listening to the podcast is going to hear the pour. I'm drinking some single malt scotch. I'm not going to mention who the company is because they haven't paid for advertising like Dormevu has, so they get no free plug, but it's a nice scotch. You always give the scotch a little air, kind of like you do with a glass of wine. Aerate it a bit. Anyway, so my wife goes, what's the difference? Should be the same thing. Be yourself. Don't try to be like someone else. Be who you always were. Be who you are. So that took me 5 minutes to say, by the way, here on my intro. But I am who I am, and this is what you get, and it's not going to be scripted, and I'm not going to do anything I was attempting to do in the last couple of hours. That's it. I pressed record, and here I am. This is what I do best. So, because of Snowmageddon, can I have a sip of this scotch, by the way? Did I say you should never drink solo? It's not something you should get used to ever doing. They say when you drink by yourself, not good. No. But fuck it, I'm drinking. Hopefully you're watching this podcast right now and you're having a drink too. Unless it's early morning, then a coffee. That's the beauty of podcasts, especially with a back catalog. You could go back, listen to whatever you want to listen to, whatever interests you, watch whatever you want to watch, eat while watching the podcast, watch it, listen to it, consume it the way you want. That's the beauty about podcasts. So, where were we? My wife was basically saying, be yourself, be who you are, and do what you do best. So here I am doing what I think I do best, and that's communicating one-on-one with you on the other side. So, Snowmageddon, as I was saying, has caused me to be solo this week on the podcast because I couldn't expect somebody to have to snowblow their way or snowplow their way to my house. Because we did see 25 centimeters of snow. We've never seen 25 centimeters of snow before. In Canada, for our American friends watching, that's 10 inches of snow. I know that sounds like a lot, but this is something I've been used to, and people from my generation have been used to, and people who are even younger than me have been used to for a lifetime living in Canada. This is nothing new, but on social media, every post, every story, everything you read, everything you see is somebody shoveling the snow, throwing a snowball, jumping in the snow, taking their clothes off and lying naked in the snow, banging in the snow. I haven't seen that one. That would have been interesting, by the way. I'm sure that's happening on OnlyFans somewhere, but even though they can't show nudity on OnlyFans, right? Only partial nudity? I don't know. I don't subscribe to any of those channels yet. But it's crazy. And I'm looking at all these posts and I'm wondering to myself, where do these people live? You know, because maybe they don't live here and are here just for a couple of weeks. And it can't be. No, it can't be everybody's out of town and marveled by something they see every year, almost every second day. It snows in Canada. This is nothing new. But by the posts you've been witnessing on social media in the last 24 hours to 48 hours, snow, what's that? Never heard of it. It's nuts. It's nutty, people. We've lost our minds. We really have nothing else to broadcast. We have nothing else to talk about. And I've been guilty of it too. I think I posted a picture in my hot tub yesterday with snow surrounding the hot tub, because that to me too was, actually that was more dealing with my depression of having to be here all winter long and being in a hot tub, not surrounded by palm trees and nicer weather. But I have to be honest, it was great. I told my wife, isn't this beautiful? And we had a moment, not one of those moments, but we had a moment together where we were realizing our surroundings and saying, this is gorgeous. Winter in Canada is beautiful. Not if you're here every single day and it's snowing like crazy every single day, but it's nice if you make good use of the time you have and you find something to do that makes sense during a Canadian winter, right? You keep yourself busy. Keep yourself locked in the house like the Quebec government has done to us. Different story. Then we all go nuts. Then we all start losing our cervellos, like we say in Italian, our minds, our brains. and lots of mental health issues in the last couple of years. Let me tell you, there's a lot of people suffering out there, and we're all on the same boat. Different people have different levels of anxiety, different levels of stress, but we have all been stressed to the max with everything we've gone through during the last couple of years of this pandemic. So I wanted to keep this podcast on a lighter note. I didn't want to get too political. I didn't want to seem like a complete cynic, overly negative. It's hard not to be. There's a lot of posts you see on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, on a minute-to-minute basis based on how long or how much time you're spending on your Instagram or Facebook or social media, Twitter, that remind you that what we're going through is not normal. I've hated the words new normal since the beginning. I was unwilling to accept that this was to be our new normal, that this would be the world we would be living in from now on. Not this guy. No way. And not you either. Not the majority of the people who are watching. Some people are okay with accepting whatever their government tells them. They regard it as complete fact, and they regard people like me or us who think the way we think and think freely and might not always be on the same wavelength as the narrative. As a matter of fact, sometimes we're counter-narrative. Most of the time we are. Conspiracy theorists or crazies. That's what we've been labeled. We've been labeled nutty, crazy. He has lost his mind. She has lost her marbles. She's not the same. He's not the same. We've heard this from acquaintances, friends, family members. And it's a shame. It's a real pity. There's a part of me that thinks, I'm taking names. I don't know if people have thought this. I have these weird fantasies. I know people think about, threesomes and orgies and all these other fantasies that they have, and that's good too. But I've had these fantasies where I'm taking names. I'm writing down everybody who said something mean about me, either directly or indirectly, or blocked me, or unfriended me, or unfollowed me, or stopped calling me, or stopped working with me, or et cetera, et cetera. And I wrote this list of all these names, and one day I want to have that list when things get back to normal, because things are getting back to normal. And I want to take that list out and say, you doubted me, you unfriended me, you ended our friendship, and I don't have time for you anymore. And I don't have time for people like you anymore. But that's not the way a good, compassionate human being deals with conflict. And that's what this has been, a big conflict of opposing opinions. Some will call 90% right and the 10% wrong. Let's call it that, what the media calls it. But the truth of the matter is it's more like 50-50. There's a little truth on both sides. There's a lot of wrong on both sides, but no side is more right than the other just because you hear it on the 6 o'clock news or you hear your favorite woke radio host tell you so. I have these fantasies. I have these fantasies of, turning away people that decided to end our friendship or move on. But it's not right. It's not right. The Dalai Lama, one of the best books I ever read was The Art of Happiness by the Dalai Lama. Well, all he preaches is compassion towards people, towards animals, towards every living thing, towards everything. And he says that the true art of happiness is by living through compassion and understanding that we're all here together and we're all in this together. And it all begins and ends with us together as a collective. And he's right. And so I've pushed that fantasy aside of telling everyone, I told you so, because it would feel good in the end, right? To throw it in everybody's face, but that's just not the right thing to do. Lots of things to talk about. Lots of things that I've been wanting to get off my chest. And I've been wanting to clear up. I wanted to call this podcast, Let's Clear Some Things Up. And my wife and a couple of friends that I, threw the idea at said, why are you clearing things up? Why do you have to justify anything you say or anything you believe in? Why do you have to justify it? Who cares? Who gives a shit what people think? If they don't like it, too bad. I mean, they already have either jumped off your bandwagon, Frank, or climbed on it and holding for dear life with you till the end of this game. So why bother? And that's a good point. But it's not necessarily a clearing up of things. It's more a cleansing of things, It's kind of like I cut myself the other day, and, you clean it up, you clean the cut up, you put some rubbing alcohol on it. Well, that burns. That really burns. But then you put the Band-Aid on it, and you still know it's there because it hurts until it heals, right? So it's more of a cleansing of the womb. That's what I want to do. Because there are a lot of wounds. Two youths. Tell the two youths. I sound like I'm on that movie now. I'm an actor on that movie. Wounds, not wombs. I don't have a womb. Wounds. So we all have wounds from this pandemic, and they all need to heal. And I don't think anyone on one side of the spectrum will fully ever convince someone else who's still on the other side 2 years later. Now, I started March 2020 as afraid as anyone else. I was super, super scared. As a matter of fact, all the food we were ordering online and getting delivered to us was wiped down. Every single spot on the oat milk carton and you name it, we cleaned it, I was one of the first people wiping everything down. I was one of the first people on my social media who went on and said, we should wear masks. When the doctors and hospitals were saying, no, masks don't work, I was saying, we need to wear masks. You'll see by the end of this summer, we'll all be wearing masks, because I didn't know. I didn't know what the hell was going on like anyone else. We were all very scared. Being a germaphobe, a lifetime germaphobe, and hypochondriac, this was the worst thing, or is the worst thing that could happen to people like us, right? We freak out even more. But if anything, what COVID-19 has taught me is we need our immune systems to help us fight all this stuff, things that we learned when we were much younger, but it only reinforced that in my mind. We need to get germs. Everything can't be perfectly clean or sterile, and we need to get sick, and we need to live our lives with our immune systems fighting whatever it is we're trying to fight off, and protect the most vulnerable and the people who are immune compromised. Protect them, but keep living our lives. But I didn't change my mentality or my outlook towards that until we went over to Arizona last year at this time and spent some time in America, in a very free state, in a very free society, where they lifted the mask mandate at the end of February, early March, whenever it was, and we didn't wear masks for 4.5 months. And we were hanging out with people, and I had kids, my neighbor's kids, jumping on me in the pool, and germs all over the place, and here, Uncle Frank, have my cookie. Here, have a Dorito, putting it in my mouth. after they've touched their nose 20 times. But what I realized after that is what I realized really quick is I wasn't scared anymore. So I stopped wiping down everything, and I just made sure I always washed my hands and I didn't touch my face. Tried to keep things clean around me, but I wasn't the overbearing germaphobe people had learned about either on my radio show or when they met me. They knew how finicky I was and how certain things had to be placed in a certain way because of germs. I wasn't quite Howie Mandel, but I was up there. Let's say he's at 110% OCD germaphobe. I was at maybe 60%. But now I'm truly at 10%. And I can't be more honest with you. And COVID-19 has helped me through that and made me realize that life goes on long after the thrill of COVID's gone. So here I am trying to build bridges between all of us and people as a regular person, a regular everyday Canadian, Quebecer, Montrealer, North American, world citizen, that we need to love and respect each other and allow each other to learn at our own pace. And at some point, people come around and they start to realize what is really going on here. Because there's something that just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. These lockdowns, these restrictions, these mandates, these curfews, the way Quebec has handled it, the way they've spent over, I don't even know, $100 million on promoting COVID-19 and getting, your jab, but unwilling to put money into the healthcare system to protect you once the next wave hits, is puzzling to me. It's puzzling. It's shocking. It's confusing as to why the Canadian government never puts money into the solution so that when we're faced with another health crisis, we're ready. I don't need to dive into that again, right? But this is what makes sense to me and people like me. So I'm clearing things up, or I'm cleansing the womb. Like I said, why do I keep calling it womb? Wound. I'm obsessed with wombs for some reason. The two youths. I'm cleansing the wound. Let's talk a bit about my thoughts on what has become known as legacy media. We don't call it mainstream media anymore because the mainstream now is becoming invaded or occupied by people who have real audiences and true audiences, aka Joe Rogan, or as a former friend of mine referred to him as that effing C-U-N-T. Don't like saying that word, but I guess I could have said it after I spelled it out. There's some people who really can't stand him, or people like him. But they've become, people like Joe, people like everyday podcasters, Andrew Schultz, the list goes on and on and on, have become the true mainstream media. Just look at the numbers. Mainstream media lagging behind with ratings, down at the bottom. So they've now been known or have been renamed legacy media. And here's my issue. A lot of people wonder, Frank, what's your issue with somebody that provided you a paycheck for so many years? And I say I have a lot of issues. I had issues with media when I was working in the mainstream media at the time. I had issues but I never let it get to a point of, being a difficult worker. You ask anybody I ever worked with, I always got along with people. I always tried my best to respect everybody. And understand that we're not all the same and we don't all think the same way, but I've always was very open-minded and I always got along with everybody. I tried to respect as many people as I could unless they disrespected me. And then we had a problem because then I tell you exactly how I felt. But what's my problem with the media today? Well, the media today is not the media that we once knew. Back in the day, when you would watch a journalist like Walter Cronkite or you'd watch somebody like Dan Rather at the time, Tom Brokaw, Peter Jennings, Charlie Rose, McNeil and Lair, the list goes on, Diane Sawyer, Barbara Walters at the time when she first started in news. The list goes on and on. The media people, the journalists we remember, were journalists first. They weren't rolling their eyes after a news story or telling you on election night that they were so happy that Joe Biden won the election. Thank God Joe Biden won the election. I don't know what I would do if he hadn't won. I don't know if I would be here tomorrow hosting my late night show. They would never do that because they would give you the facts. Here are the facts. Here's the story. You decide. Nowadays, news is nonstop eye rolling. It's sighs, eye rolling. I can't believe it, and the oh my gods. I don't know what I'm watching anymore. It's completely dysfunctional, and it's completely one-sided and one narrative. I mean, here in Montreal, just as a classic example, turn on any radio station, read any newspaper, turn on the television. Do you ever hear anyone talk about the other side? No. Well, that's hard. That's hard when all your commercials and ad space is taken up by Pfizer and all these companies. It's hard to then tell your personalities that if they have a different opinion, that's okay. That would never happen, especially considering who's putting money in their pockets. So right there, we have a problem. We have a big problem. And they can't see it. They would much rather attack people like you and I who have a different opinion and label us. See, at the beginning it was the unvaccinated, and now the unvaccinated have become anti-vaxxers. And I'm not going to get into a whole inoculation conversation because, hey, that's a good album name, The Inoculation Conversation. Because people have talked about it ad nauseum, and it's, what else is there to say? But except for the fact that I truly believe I'm a pro-choicer, and you get to do what you want. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts, and that doesn't change. It's okay with, a fetus, but it's not okay with injecting something in you. No, it has to be consistent. So I believe that we have a right to choose. And I think it's medical tyranny that people are forcing or taxing their citizens or forcing their citizens, and who knows what's next, because they don't want to inject themselves with something they're unsure about, or for whatever reason. Might be a religious reason, might be whatever it is. That's not up to the government or the state to decide. That's up to you to decide. So that's my problem. My problem is you turn on any channel, any frequency, and they refer to people in the 10% as the troublemakers. And what are we going to do about this guy? Will we be invited? This is all I heard before the holidays. My brother-in-law is unvaxxed, and my sister-in-law is unvaxxed, and this person is unvaxxed. What are we going to do about them? How do we handle them at the dinner table? These horrible people. They don't even realize, these so-called journalists, broadcasters, or the new woke, as I like to call them, what they've become. They've They've thrown balance out the window. I mean, it doesn't exist anymore. There's no balance. It's like, here's the narrative. You're either with us or against us. And who knows what they would do if they were able to do something about it. What they would do with the 600 or 1,000 or so people or more that, I think it's way more, by the way, that decided not to go down that route and get the shot. And they'll do anything. They'll say in our 120 years of vaccination, did we ever worry about it when we took it for this and when we took it for that? Did we ever hesitate? Well, no, it's not the same at all. Because back in the day when you took it for those things, you didn't get those things. Whatever it is you took it for, you're good. Now, we just don't know what the hell's going on. We just don't. That doesn't mean you can't sign up for it. That doesn't mean you can't booster up if you want to. I'm saying you can if you want to. But if you don't, you shouldn't have to. That's it. That's where the conversation begins and ends for me and people like me. So I wanted to clear things up that I don't miss working in legacy media because I don't like where they're at and where they're going. But I miss, from the bottom of my heart, I truly miss working on the radio and talking and hosting events and hosting a morning show and having great debates with my co-host and engaging people. And even though it was fluff and it was, top 40 radio, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. I miss introducing songs, and bringing it to the post, as we say in the radio industry, to vocals. You stop talking and you say the call letters, name of the radio station, and the vocals miraculously appear after you say that. There's an art to that. It's a lot of fun. Anyone who grew up listening to top 40 radio probably got into radio, into top 40 or music radio because they heard, the boss jocks of the day doing that, and they thought, this is cool. This is the coolest thing. That's why I got into it. And I always loved radio. I always loved the fact, the theater of the mind always blew me away, that somebody was in a studio somewhere, or this voice coming out of my radio, and I could listen to these personalities tell me a story, or a great story, and without the visuals, and take me through whatever it is they're taking me through, a chapter in their life, a moment from earlier in the day, whatever. Explaining what's happening at a sporting event, the play-by-play, the color. It's fantastic. The medium of radio, especially, because that was the one I was in for almost 30 years, is fantastic. I miss radio and I love radio. What I can't stand is the industry and some of the people who are running it. There's a lot of great people still running it. There's some executives I think are were the best and still are the best at what they do. And there's a lot of broadcasters and there's a lot of people on the radio who I think are super talented and great. And some are just playing the game because they have no choice and the paycheck comes every 2 weeks. I understand. I've been there, done that, so I understand. But I would not have made it through this pandemic hosting a radio show because at some point I would have cracked. Anyone who knows me knows I would have cracked. So it's such a beautiful medium, but I find it so... radio is the blockbuster video of audio. It really is. The blockbuster video of audio listening. The medium that never reinvented themselves, and then, boom, something else comes in and takes over. They're barely hanging on to dear life. And they're doing nothing to save themselves. Maybe some companies are in other parts of Canada, but here where I live in Montreal, they're doing nothing to save themselves. You know what they're doing? They're collecting as many as the ad dollars as they can. It's a hit and run situation. Let's grab as much as we still can till people figure out they're wasting their money buying ad time on the radio because their product is subpar. Let's be honest and break it down here. When you're a radio station and you have billboards at the side of the highway, specifically I'm talking about here in Montreal, and the message you're trying to convey is, and the billboard is, we play 90 minutes of nonstop hit music, commercial free. Well, maybe that worked in 1996, but in 2022, that's lazy. I call that lazy programming. That's somebody who either doesn't give a shit or their superior is telling them, yeah, just put a couple of billboards out there and that's the message we want to send to people. And or people have no creative backbone anymore because you could get 100 million songs in a row on Spotify or Apple. As many songs as it takes for you to live your entire life, they've got it for you. Commercial free, by the way. But I'm driving on the highway and I see a billboard that says 90 minutes nonstop, commercial free, hit music. And I'm going to stop in my tracks and go, wait, holy fuck. Let me put this on right now. They're not playing any commercials for 90 minutes. Who in their right mind thinks that way? So that to me is a wasted opportunity, a wasted ad campaign. Another popular one you see is they have a picture of a couple of artists they play. Like that means anything. So there's a picture of Katy Perry and Bruno Mars, who, by the way, have not had a hit, I don't think, in years. Okay, but there they are because everybody knows Bruno Mars and Katy Perry. Great artists, by the way. I'm not saying that they don't have talent, but that's it. That's where they're spending their promotional dollars on. That's where they're allocating their funds. We're going to tell people we play Bruno Mars and Katy Perry, stuff like that. And we're going to tell people we play 90 minutes of nonstop hit music. Fantastic. Lazy programming, lazy. If I was in charge, at some point I would say, we can't do this. And I would be out of a job because I'd be speaking up and they think I was an asshole. But the truth of the matter would be, I'm right. And I was like, this is horrible. What do you mean 90 minutes? You know how many times I said it to them when I worked back in radio? I'm like, why are we even saying 2 hours of nonstop music, 60 minutes of nonstop music? We'll be back in 7 minutes after we play 7 minutes of commercial. It's just insanity. They've done nothing to reinvent themselves. So as the years go by, I lose more and more respect for the business that I truly loved all my life because they're not doing anything. It's abandoned ship. And the captain, guess where the captain is? Captain's not going down with their ship. They're taking the lifeboat away from the listener. And the comparison is, well, they don't give a shit truly about whether your radio experience is gratifying. They don't care. They're just going to put anything out because they have to, and it's ratings, and they need to do something. Put it out there and hope somebody listens to us. It's just crazy to me. It's just nuts. It's nuts to me that nobody puts their foot down in these big companies and says, "Whoa, what is this? Like, what are we doing? Like, is this a joke? Like, we're not even putting any effort into it." What I would do? Okay, first of all, I wouldn't even tell anyone what I would do because I'm not giving you any ideas for free. But I guarantee you, I have a whole Rolodex. Not that I have a Rolodex, a whole iPhone full of ideas that I write down. If radio were to be saved, here's what I would do to save it. I have it. If I could save radio, here's what I would do. Not that anyone would allow me to save it, but here's what I would do. They don't want people like me. They don't want people who think like me, act like me. Anyone who thinks like us, acts like us, they don't want that. They want yes people. They want somebody to collect their paycheck, and they want somebody to relay the message from corporate, which is usually out of Toronto, and that's it. Shut your fucking mouth and do your job. That's what they want to do. So, when the whole business burns in a fiery blaze of glory, you'll know that they did nothing to save it. Because at this point, if you're not going to put your best personalities on the billboard, your best personalities, not untalented hacks who have zero ability and flavor of the day, but your best personalities on, and take off all the music on your radio station, because nobody's listening to you for the fucking music, let's be honest, unless they're over 45 and 50 and don't want to pay for any radio services, or they haven't figured out Spotify yet. Nobody wants to listen to, the same songs over and over again. So, wouldn't it be better to promote a local Montreal talent who people respect, want to hear from? Like here in Quebec, there's a gentleman named polarized. I don't know where he even stands on the whole pandemic thing, is not the point, but he's respected. He's a personality. He's a giant. People love him. Why not have somebody like him? By the way, the French side here in Quebec, French radio seems to get it a little more, but even they have their moments with the 90 minutes of nonstop hits, which I'll never understand. But my point is, promote, get your medium, get your business, get your industry in people's conversations again. Get people talking about you again. They don't care. They don't care. They don't care. They don't care anymore. They don't care whether you listen or not. They're just going with the flow. And I guarantee you there's somebody watching this that's working in radio or television right now going, he's right. They don't. Nobody gives a shit. So that to me is, for somebody who grew up listening to radio and admiring it and loving it, and then having worked in it for 30 years, is completely, it's depressing to see what they're doing to the industry. At that point, go up on Mount Royal, that's here in Montreal, our mountain. Montreal's all around it. That's where our transmitter is, our radio transmitter. Or tell the engineer on duty that day to just shut off the transmitter and go home. There's no point. There's no point. There's no point in having a building with 100, 150 people. Can you believe some of these radio companies, TV companies too? They have these big buildings with hundreds of people working in them. For what? For what? This is your product? And you have hundreds of people working in a brick and mortar place when the pandemic has shown everyone could work from home. And what are all these people doing? What are they doing besides collecting? It's a racket. That's what it is. Collecting the last few pennies they can until somebody figures them out once and for all. I did, by the way, years ago. And stops listening or turns them off completely one last time. It's sad. It really is. Sorry, I didn't mean to go into this soliloquy about radio, but it drives me nuts. It drives me nuts to see these lazy attempts at promotion, lazy attempts at imaging, branding. It's so disappointing. I don't know what other word to use, but it's just lazy. It's lazy. It's like anyone could do it. Anybody could come. They were doing it 30 years ago. That was cool 30 years. It wasn't even that cool 30 years ago, but it was, okay, we'll accept it. You're playing 10 songs in a row in 1996, and there's no Spotify, and there's no internet, and there's barely an internet. Nothing's happening. You're playing 10 songs. You have the brand new song by the Backstreet Boys coming up. There's nowhere else for me to get it. That's amazing. That's what radio was. Nowadays, they need to reinvent themselves because they can't break those songs. They don't even want to play the new songs. They'll play it. They'll play the new song, by the way, now when it comes out. They'll play it a couple of times during the day. And then, depending on how it goes, they might add it a few days later, a week later, or 2 weeks later, and then they'll play it to death for years. They think and program the way they did 30 years ago. There's no ingenuity. There's no new ideas. Anyway, so I'm glad that I'm no longer part of it. I really am. Because when I was in it, it was depressing. And for those, I don't want to call people losers just because they disagree or have criticisms of me and the way I speak, who are sitting and saying, well, that's why you haven't been hired or whatever. No, that's not why. Because I used to say it with 100% diplomacy back in the days. I used to say it with all due respect to anyone who would listen, and they pretended like they wanted to listen and cared, but they didn't care. Because at the end of the day, it's that steam train coming down the track, and it's at some point the track ends and the train goes into the valley. But until then, everything's good. That's what radio is. Oh yeah, the scotch is good. Okay, I think I talked about radio enough. I wanted to mention a couple of things that bothered me. First of all, may Bob Saget and Betty White rest in peace. I used to be a big fan back in the day of the Golden Girls. I used to watch Bob Saget on, America's Funniest Home Videos. I thought he was a good comedian. It's sad when you see people that you grew up watching passing away. It reminds you that you don't have that much time here on earth too. Things that meant a lot to you when you were a kid, are no longer around, and they start disappearing or start dying off. It reminds you of your own mortality, and it's not to get depressing, but it's depressing. It really is. So when Bob Saget passed away, I'll tell you what bothers me is how everybody on either side of the spectrum thinks they're so right. So you got the vaccinated who will defend, Bob Saget and Betty White till the end. It's like, listen, they said that it had nothing to do with the booster, and we believe it, and that's not how they died, and we accept that. And then there's the people who are more suspicious and possibly unvaccinated who are like, the booster killed Betty White. She took it 3 days before. The booster killed Bob Saget. He took it a couple of weeks before. I think both sides are crazy because I think there's a little truth in what both sides are saying. And here's why. If you're on the side that believes they died of either natural causes or a heart attack or a stroke or whatever it is they died of, if you believe that's the way they died, sure, very possible, because guess what? That's how people died pre-COVID. People dropped dead at 65. And people dropped dead at 99 before COVID. And people are still dropping dead now during COVID. Of COVID, not of COVID. Kind of maybe like COVID because of COVID. But so I do believe that there's a possibility that the booster could have killed either one of them, both of them, or maybe they just died of natural causes. And I do believe it's possible that I'm willing to bet that the truth comes out one day, and we will know, depending on how this whole thing ends, this whole pandemic ends. But to say for certain, and I'm no medical doctor, unless you're a medical doctor watching this, then, or you performed the autopsy, the medical examiner on Bob Saget or Betty White. I don't even know if she had an autopsy performed. I know Bob did, and they didn't find anything. But I'm not a medical doctor, and I can't say without a shadow of a doubt that that's how they died. I just don't know. But I do believe it's very possible. The possibility lies within us finding out, the truth one day. It is very possible that it did happen, and it's also possible they just died. So it makes me laugh when I hear either side. I have some friends who are really, people think I'm a conspiracy theorist. I don't think so. I think I'm pretty balanced. I have friends who believe 100%. And they also believe that Bob Saget was a pedo. I don't even know how to say the word because don't entertain those thoughts. But It's crazy. It's like they believe really out there thoughts, which they could be right about. I don't know. We don't know, right? I think people are too quick to dismiss it, the possibility that he is or isn't, or that he died one way or another, or that she died one way or another. And there are other people who are just too quick to say, oh, yeah, that's what happened. For sure, 100%, that's how they died. And by the way, I would never have left him with my kid. It's just crazy. The world we live in is nuts. People twist and turn everything and anything they can. Like that. And to benefit either their narrative or their dialogue or their stand. I think that's dangerous too. Now, I think a lot of people know where I stand about a lot of different things. But, I try to be as logical as I can sometimes, even when I'm talking with my wife or friends, and say, well, whoa, hang on a second here. I don't think... Some people think they're trying to kill us. They're trying to kill us off. They're trying to depopulate the planet. Possibility. I'm not saying they're not. I'm saying it's a possibility. Very possible. There are other people who think that's crazy talk. I'm somewhere like, I think it's possible. But I'm not convinced 100%. But I am convinced that something is going on and something is really shady and doesn't make sense because of how they've handled this thing over the course of many years now with no end in sight. I'm sorry, but to still be in March of 2020 and thinking that way now, to me, is crazy. You had to have learned something in the last almost 24 months, that something smells fishy. And usually when it does, you're looking at a piece of tuna or salmon. You know what I'm saying? Maybe it's sea urchin you like or whatever it is, but if it smells fishy, it probably is. Those are my thoughts on Bob and the late, great Betty White. Let them rest in peace. And maybe one day we'll have an answer. Hey, before I continue the rest of this podcast, I just wanted to bring up how important it is for all of us to get a good night's sleep. Sleep is all we have. And by that I mean, without a good night's rest, you can't function the next day. How many times do you wake up in the middle of the night? Now, it could be something you ate before, right? You ate a little late, or you're overtired to the point that you're overthinking and you just can't get to sleep. Or sometimes it's because something doesn't feel right against your body. Most of the time, that's what it is. Something doesn't feel right behind your neck. I've had these problems. And they're not necessarily joint aches or, muscle aches. It's because your head is not resting properly on the pillow. Maybe you don't have the right pillow. Maybe it's the contours are not right for your head. Maybe it's too soft. Maybe it's too hard. Maybe your mattress is too soft, not firm enough. Whatever the case is, Dormez-vous has the sleep experts you need to speak to, either online or in store, to figure out these problems with you, because it's a problem. If you can't sleep, how are you going to live your life? What do they say? You need about 8 hours of sleep every night. You're maybe getting 5 or 6 good hours, because chances are it's that mattress or pillow, I'm telling you. So you need to speak to a Dormez-vous sleep expert, online or in store. Their New Year, New You event is happening as we speak. It's a brand new year. People make resolutions every day, and they break them the day after. The best resolution you could make in 2022 is getting all your sleeping problems solved by going to Dormez-vous. Check them out. New year, new you, better sleep, Dormez-vous in 2022. All right, back to the podcast. I'm going to pour myself another scotch. I have a couple of more things to say. Again, I'm not showing the label of the scotch because If this brand wanted to pay me, we could mention them just like we mentioned Dormez-vous. A little envelope. We could do whatever. We could talk about whatever you want. We could do whatever you want. But I'm not one of those guys that's going to give free plugs. No. Done enough of that over the years. I try to avoid even calling certain arenas or stadiums where sports teams play at the corporate name because, all right, well, they pay for the rights to be on, the sign outside the arena or to have the name of the arena. You don't pay me to call it the center or arena or stadium. So why give them a free plug? Cheers. Salud. I wanted to talk about a little hockey and the National Hockey League and the mess that the season has been. With like every day, you go to Twitter or you read a story, a hockey story, or especially a hockey story, and it's like so-and-so is on COVID protocol, and this team is completely depleted. It just so happens to be my team. In 32nd place, by the way, dead last in the National Hockey League, the Montreal Canadiens. Not fun. But I wanted to talk about hockey for a bit. And I don't want to go down another heavy political road, but just quickly, how I find it very interesting that the Montreal Canadiens finally named their GM, Ken Hughes. He grew up on the English side of Montreal. He speaks French, but his name is Kent Hughes. And before that, we hired Jeff Gorton, another English guy. I'm sure this is going to piss off some people, but I've always been a believer that you hire the best person for the job. Back in the day, when the Montreal Expos had, Buck Rogers or Philippe Alou, whoever they had, if the coach didn't speak, or even in professional soccer, if the coach doesn't speak the language, they have a translator because you hire the best person for the job. Now, I know there's a lot of great French-Canadian coaches and GMs and all that, but they were interviewed, and they went with 2 English guys, so let's give them a break. That's all I want to say about that. One of the last things I wanted to talk about before getting to the end of this podcast, which is about to hit 1 hour. Man, can I talk? I didn't think I could do this at first. I had started to script it and thought to myself, this is horrible. This is a disaster. This is a ship sinking in the middle of the ocean. I can't do this, but I'm actually succeeding in doing what I thought I couldn't do without a script, and that's talking about whatever it is I talk about. Because I've done it a million times. I just thought it would be more interesting to do a, slick show with editing and things coming at me as I'm talking about them. And then I thought, why? Who gives a shit? So my wife and I sat down, no joke, last week. And my wife's she was born and raised in Alberta. We met in Toronto when I lived there. I lived in Alberta as well. But we met in Toronto, then we moved to Alberta together where I hosted a morning show for 4 years. Then we moved to Montreal here. We've been here now for almost 11 years, for 11 years. So she's an English Canadian, a true English Canadian, which means she was born in Canada and raised in Canada, like real Canada. That's gonna piss some people off, but I was just saying, and like English Canada, and she sometimes finds it hard to understand what the hell's going on in Quebec. She loves it here, she loves the culture, she loves the city, but not a fan of the politics. But then again, there's a lot of Quebecers who are not a fan of the politics and all the bullshit. But she said to me, she goes, Frank, we need to sit down and write a list, a pros and cons list on staying here. Here's the list right here. It's a pros and cons list. Pros and cons to staying in Quebec or leaving Quebec. And this is what we came up with. Mostly my wife. It's in my wife's handwriting. And I had her say most of the stuff because I really wanted to hear. Because I know what the pros and cons to living in. I know what the negatives. Construction, pylons, potholes, language issues, stupid bills, not allowing. Culture's great. We have culture. As long as it's not your culture, we're good. Just pure ridiculousness and politics here in Quebec that should have no place. We should just be living our lives. The French language, in my opinion, is very strong. We all speak French. I don't believe it's in jeopardy. I don't want to even go into that conversation, but there's a lot of great things about Quebec. And I was even speaking to my last guest, Gab, about this. And he was saying, man, we have one of the best places. Montreal's like one of the best cities in the world, in North America. It's a great city. It's the original city of champions. What the hell happened? What's going on here? Well, it's all the bullshit. If you push everything aside, there's a lot of great things about Quebec. Like poutine, and maple syrup, and steamies, and smoked meat, and strip clubs. And the Montreal Canadiens, and beautiful people, and fashion, and culture, and the fact we come from so many different parts of the world, and French, and English. It's a great place. But this never-ending debate of, I don't even need to get into it, just puts a stain on this place, a forever stain, the stain that you think is going to come off, but then you didn't put whatever the hell it's called, the nanotech or whatever on your couch, and you spill wine on it, and it's there forever. Your clumsiness is forever captured into that sofa because you made that mistake once. That's Quebec. Stains all over us because we can't get past it. Certain people can't get past certain things. So the pros and cons of staying in Quebec. Here's what my wife wrote with a little bit of help from her husband. Number 1, great person she wrote, family and friends. Number 2, we earn our livelihood here. So she wrote, financial and everything that we have is here in Quebec. Number 1, family and friends. Number 2, livelihood and finances, money opportunities, all here. For me and my podcast and what I'm doing, my base is here. This is where people know me. Don't think I haven't thought about picking up and leaving and going somewhere else. But I know my base will always be here. So no matter where I end up, this is the audience, one of the big audiences that I will speak to. Now, of course, with this podcast, I'm trying to stretch it into other parts of Canada, and I look at the numbers, and hey, it's getting there. Depending on who the guests are, what we're talking about, we'll get there eventually. That's my goal. She wrote down our house, even though my wife can easily forget that we love our home and we love our neighborhood and love our neighbors, and that's all part of the house and community, and we love it here where we live just outside of Montreal, across the bridge. And that's important to us. So those are the things that she wrote. Those are the pros. That's where it ended, though. The cons, she wrote, no freedom. And she's not wrong about that. But mind you, I said to her, where are you going to go, Ontario? You think Ontario's any better? It's a little better because it has a couple of things that we don't, but not much freedom happening in Ontario either, or other parts of Canada. Look at BC. She wrote, very high taxes. That would be the highest in North America, right? Unless we're bringing in California to this conversation. But California, again, has beaches, sandy beaches, palm trees, surfing, Pacific Ocean, San Francisco, San Diego, LA, Hollywood, Sunset Strip, as the song says. And we have high taxes. They have high taxes. California is not a great place to live anymore. That's what I hear from my friends, what I see. But Quebec, you got no freedom, high taxes, cold. She put very cold. language, and she wrote mental health. Mental health. So we've all been struggling with mental health. And let me tell you, your mental health goes down the gutter with lack of freedom, high taxes, cold language, and everything else we mentioned. Mental health struggles with all that stuff. Not to mention all the other things. Quebec is known for oppressing. Now, any of the pros and cons to leaving Quebec, with no specific place, but depending on some of the choices we would have and where to go, she wrote, freedom. Freedom always comes first. And a lot of people, by the way, take that word for granted. Freedom, as I was saying in my last podcast, is a bad word, especially to a lot of people here in Canadian media. Don't say freedom, because freedom is part of the American rhetoric as we know it. The word as we know it is a negative word when said in how it's usually used in the sentence in America. Freedom, not a good thing. So she wrote pros, freedom, warmer weather. She put golf. That was for me. Enzo, that's my dog. Enzo, happier. Yeah, because he'd be in a warmer climate. Much lower taxes, great mental health. And cons, she put probably a hotter summer, no family, and we would have to sell everything and move away, possibly. So there you go. That was a list of staying or moving. A genuine list, by the way. Written by my wife with a little bit of help from me. So that was interesting. I thought that was that spoke volumes. I saw that, and especially hearing my wife and seeing her write it down, I realized how I grew up here. She didn't. And if it wasn't for me wanting to stay, if I said to her tomorrow, let's go, I think she would pack her bags within an hour. She'd be gone. And so we need to rethink things. We all do. And I know I've been hearing from a lot of people, a lot of you via the DMs and messages. A lot of people considering moving to Florida. A lot of people have left already. I know so many people that have left already. A lot of people applying for special visas to open businesses in the United States. And a lot of people I know moved to Europe. Not much better there. Some of the places they've gone to. But how many scotches have I had? I think half an ounce and a half an ounce. I haven't even had a full... there we go. Now we have... a little more scotch. So a lot of people are talking about it. A lot of people are having these conversations because we are not here for a long time, as the song says, or many songs say. We're here for a good time. Everything's a song. I don't know if you've noticed on my Instagram stories, everything's a song. Every story, every opinion has a soundtrack to it, because that's what life is, right? Music is a soundtrack to our lives. So we're not here for a long time. We aren't. So we should be happy. We should be living our best life. All of us. And if you're not happy somewhere, it's hard. It's hard to leave family. It's hard to pack up and leave. But especially if it's for your mental well-being, then some people, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Boom, 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 boom. I got something to tell you. I got something to say. Billy Ocean. And Ocean would be nice right about now. Happy Snowmageddon. So people, if there's one good thing that this pandemic has done, is people have reevaluated everything in their life. And if you haven't yet, I'd be totally shocked, because I don't know of one person that hasn't thought about everything. We've had a lot of time on our hands, and everyone I know, including myself, whether you've written a list or not, people have started to reevaluate everything. Relationships, jobs, friendships. We've made new friends. We've lost a lot more. But if this thing has taught us anything, is we really, as sad as it sounds, with every minute that passes and every hour and every day that passes, we're running out of time. You think you're here for, you don't know. I know people, you know people who are going through big battles in their life right now. Addiction, mental health issues, cancers, other illnesses and disease. Those are real, true life battles that they were going through before this, and now this pandemic has made it even worse on them. But I look at these people and I think to myself, I remember a friend of mine who passed away right before COVID said to me, Frank, if I had a chance, 42 years old, he passed away of cancer, and he said, if I had a chance to do this all again, he goes, I would have spent less time at work and more time with my family and enjoying life. Now, we've gotten the chance to spend a lot more time with our families, but we haven't truly been enjoying life. We might have been enjoying our quality time with the people we love, but we've been prohibited from living our full life because of all this other nonsense that's going on and how the governments have handled it. In my opinion, very poorly, mismanaged from top to bottom. So that's one thing I try to focus on, and that's good times. That's all we have. That's all we have. And time is all we have. It really is. That's all we have. So, funny, I didn't even plan this, but this just hit me. The intro to my podcast is by a friend of mine, singer-songwriter from British Columbia, who used to be part of this band called Dakona. And they were signed to Maverick Records, if I'm not mistaken, which was Madonna's old record label. They met with Madonna, and that was the same record label that I believe Alanis Morissette was signed to. And so he was part of this Christian band named Dakona, and they had some success. They had a big song called Good. You got a lot to learn, baby. So that's my friend Ryan, who's part of that band. And he's still singing and writing, and him and his wife have a business out west. And I wrote to him prior to starting this podcast, and I asked him, Ryan, would I be able to use one of your songs? It means a lot to me. And that song is, he goes, which one? I go, it's called Time, 5 times. Sometimes I call it 5 times, but that's not what the name of the song is. Sometimes I call it Time times 5. It's time. And it's a song that I heard it and I immediately fell in love with, because that's what I'm finishing off this podcast with. Time. It's all we have. So let's cut this nonsense out. Let's speak up. Let's tell the people in charge how we truly feel. Civil disobedience. If you believe in something, fight for it, because that's all we have in the end. And that ticker is always running. See, I have a ticker here. It says I've been talking for 1 hour and 14 minutes. That's the radio guy in me. 1 hour and 14 minutes. That's life. That's 1 hour 14. You never get back, and I never get back. Hopefully, I haven't bored you to death where you regret ever spending the last hour or so with me. But my point is, I had to time it because I like to know where I am. So imagine you were timing. You have this going. Sometimes I forget. So we'll finish the podcast and I'll forget to hit stop. And then I'll finally see it like 7 weeks later. And it says like 7 days, 23 hours. And it hits me like a ton of bricks. And I'm like, oh my God, all this time has passed. And another holiday that we can celebrate. And another summer. not fully open, or kind of open, but restricted. And another Christmas, we didn't see our family. That's all we have. So the song resonated with me. And I asked Ryan, I said, Ryan, can I use this song? That and the fact that if I use a popular song, I'll have to pay royalties, and I can't do that. But Ryan, it would mean so much to me if I could use your song. And he said, Bud, absolutely. So the intro song to the drive-by is called Time, 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 Time. It's by Ryan McAllister. He's fantastic. He's got a great voice. And I'm going to say a couple of words here from our lead sponsor to take us out, Dormez-vous. And then, for the first time, I'm going to play, not on the YouTube and Rumble editions of the podcast, not on the visual platforms of the podcast, but on the audio version of the podcast, I'm going to play the entire song by Ryan McAllister. And I want you to listen to the words and tell me you don't fall in love with this song. It's amazing. So thank you for listening. Thank you for watching this podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and like on YouTube. I don't think I said anything during this podcast that will have affected their community guidelines. Nothing happened last time either, and we had the video reinstated when it was pulled by YouTube, but I am always cautious now, thinking there's a possibility I said something or something was said that they didn't like. So following the sponsor mention, I'll play the entire version of Time, 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 Time by Ryan McAllister here on the Drive-By. Thank you so much for watching once again and for listening. And we'll catch you again next week. So excited to tell you about some of the guests I'll have in the coming weeks. And that's what this show is going to focus on, conversation one-on-one with some of the most interesting personalities, notables. Some are celebrities, some are athletes, some are comedians, could be anybody. Anybody with a story and something to say from the heart. Thank you so much. It's Freeway Frank, and I appreciate each and every one of you for being here, for listening, and for watching. Hey, it's Freeway Frank. Thank you so much for watching and for listening to this edition of the Drive-By podcast. Before I go, I wanted to mention how important it is for you to get a good night's rest. And I talk about it all the time, and it all begins with a better night's sleep at Dormez-vous. Now, happening throughout the month of January at Dormez-vous stores across Quebec, you could be part of their New Year, New You event, which begins with better sleep. And by doing that, you need to get more information on the right mattress for you, because we all have different sleep patterns, we all have different bodies, and we all sleep a certain way. Whether it's a pillow, sleeping accessories, or that mattress you've been wanting to get, well, time to do it. Go online, speak to a sleep expert, or go in store at Dormez-vous and begin 2022, even though we're about 3 weeks already into it, with better sleep. All right? It's never too late to get a good night's sleep with the New You, New Year event at Dormez-vous. Thank you so much for watching.
This is the Drive-By with Freeway Frank.